Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I am Pallavi Ade. I am the co-founder of Asian Pathfinders along with Shreyas Deshmukh. And for today's session, we are tying up with the Department of Geopolitics and International Relations and Manipal Academy of Higher Education. So we are really glad and honored to have this partnership. And today's discussion is on sorry, on a topic which is, I think, very important for us to understand, but a lot of, at least for me, I'll speak from a very personal perspective. I don't know a lot about, even though I want to know. So we have two amazing speakers today, Hadj Djitteye. I'm really sorry, Hadj, if I've said it wrong, and Dr. Sankalp Gurjar. The topics, like I said, is the geopolitics of coups in the Sahel region. A brief about us, Asian Pathfinders, before I give it to basically our moderator for today, Poornima. So Asian Pathfinders is a knowledge sharing platform, and the way we function is we hold these sessions of fireside chats and dialogues online on Zoom these days, and we try and bring multidisciplinary dialogues and discussions. We have had scholars coming from nearly all geographies in the world, and we're really lucky to have that. Also different topics, variety of topics, from say private military in Latin America to climate change in India to other parts, and we have African discussions today. So if you want to get in touch with us, you can always find us on social media. These are also our handles and our email addresses. You can reach out to us. We are an open forum, so we definitely encourage inputs from the community, discussions, which if you want to see a certain topic, and if you have inputs on how we can improve, please let us know. So moving on to today's session. I know Poornima will introduce the speakers, but I have the pleasure to introduce her. Ms. Poornima Balasubramanian is a PhD candidate and Dr. TMA Pai Fellow at the Department of Geopolitics and International Relations, Manipal Academy of Higher Education. Her research interests include the geopolitics of West Asia and North Africa and conflict studies. After graduating in psychology, she pursued her master's degree in geopolitics at IR, and she's currently working on the civil war in Yemen for her doctoral thesis. So over to you, Poornima.
Thank you, Pallavi. A very good morning to everyone. I first thank Pallavi, Mr. Shreyas, Anand sir, Ravi sir, and the Department of Geopolitics and IR for giving me this opportunity to moderate today's session. So let me begin by introducing our university and the department. The Manipal Academy of Higher Education, MAHE, formerly known as Manipal University, has been a pioneer in education sector since 1942 and has been a deemed university since 1993. MAHE is now recognized as a leading quality academic and education service provider and has significantly contributed to continuously improving the standards and penetration of higher education in India. MAHE has been conferred by the Ministry of Education with the special status of Institution of Eminence deemed to be university on 9th July 2018. The main campus is located at Manipal in coastal Karnataka in India. The Department of Geopolitics and International Relations has been functioning as a teaching department since 2010 with the objective to impart world-class education in the field of national and international security issues with an Indian perspective, to forge collaborative teaching and research programs on the geopolitical and geostrategic areas with top universities and research institutions around the world. The department also aims to develop an understanding on the complex issues relating to the strategic and defense issues and to build a next generation of strategic affairs and defense issues experts in the country. The department is located in the MAHE campus at Manipal. The department runs a one-of-a-kind MA program within India in geopolitics and IR. In addition to a doctoral program, the director and Dr. Ravindranathan P. is the in-charge head of the department. So as part of the webinar series that happens regularly at the department, and this time in collaboration with the Asian Pathfinders, we are here to listen to two experts speak on a very interesting topic. Today's topic on Fireside Chats is on geopolitics of coups in the Sahel region, and it is a very relevant and significant issue that has been shaping the geopolitics of this region in Africa, something that needs deeper digging and deliberation. Military coups have been a recurring trend in the Sahel region for several decades now, and it has been one of the central reasons to contribute to the instability in the region. So firstly, I shall briefly introduce the Sahel to you. It is a transition region in Africa, sandwiched between the Sahara to the north and the Sudanian savanna to the south. And it is a semi-arid zone containing 10 states, namely Senegal, Mauritania, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Nigeria, Chad, Sudan, and Eritrea. This region is also known as a hotbed for insurgency and jihadi activities. Several terror groups like Boko Haram and Al-Qaeda have active presence in this region. As I mentioned previously, the region has been witnessing a lot of attempted and successful military coups. In the last 1.5 years alone, there have been 6 coups, 1 attempted and 5 successful ones in 5 states, that is Mali, Chad, Guinea, Sudan, and Burkina Faso, which is the recent one that happened in January 2022. There have been many reasons ranging from poor governance to very low standard of living and insecurity that have been cited for these coup occurrences. While in Burkina Faso, you see citizens supporting the military coup, the Sudanese people have been protesting against the military rule for a while now in their country. But one thing is clear, there is no one-size-fits-all explanation to this pattern. And therefore, these happenings raise a number of questions, and I hope the speakers of the day will be addressing these queries in their presentation. Firstly, what are the pull and push factors of such military coups in the Sahel, and why do militaries actually intervene? Second, are these factors contained to the local aspects, local politics of the region, or is it regional or international in nature, or a combination of two or all of these? What are the repercussions of such intervention, and why does a civilian government that is in power allow the militaries to come back and stage a coup again? For example, we've seen in Mali, there have been more than 1 coup in its history so far. And also, it also raises another question: is the democratic space in the Sahel actually shrinking? What are the causes and effect of such patterns and events happening? So without further delay, allow me to introduce the first speaker of the day, Mr. Hadj Djitteye. Again, please correct me if I mispronounce your name. Yeah, he holds a master's degree in English language and literature and a master's degree in international relations. He has more than 12 years of international development and peace building experience. He has worked with the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office, Timbuktu Renaissance, Caravan to Class, the US Department of State, Creative Associates International, the Center for Civilians in Conflict, Global Integrity, Global Initiative Against Organized Crime, and the United Nations Mission in Mali. He is the president and executive director of the Timbuktu Center for Strategic Studies on Sahel, a Sahelian conflict, security, stabilization, and violent extremism researcher, a policy analyst, an international consultant, an Obama leader, a peace ambassador, and a Mandela Washington Fellow. He has also experienced war and transition situations across sub-Saharan Africa and other nations around the world. He has also worked with youth movements and youth-focused organizations. Mr. Hadj is a practitioner of peace building, civic leadership coach, and a grant writer. He has also written papers and performed research on issues such as good governance, security, DDR, stabilization, young civic engagement, violent extremism, irregular migration, and cultural heritage development. He most recently managed the 60 lakh pound Sahel Stabilization and Development Initiative for the UK Embassy CSSF program in Mali. Over to you, Mr. Djitteye.
Yeah, thank you so much for you, the moderator, and the Asian Pathfinder. So this is an honor for me to be invited to the event. Do I start directly my speech or?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I will share my screen. Yeah. Yeah. Everything is fine. Yeah. As you can see, you can see as you already introduced me. My name is Hadj Djitteye, so I will not go back to that. So my plan for this this session is like a brief introduction about the Sahel, and then military history of military coup in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, as we cannot cover the entire Sahel in this session, but we will just focus in the three main hot Sahel region, and then the geopolitical implication, and then a brief summary. Yeah. So as you can see in those pictures, so if I ask you a question, what all those gentlemen have in common? They are in military uniforms. According to you, what those gentlemen have in common? So they are all in uniform, and then they kind of give an oath to be the president of a democratic nation. So that's mean that this describe what's going on. First, Assimi Goïta in Mali, second, Guinea, Burkina Faso, and Chad. So, as you know, those last years, 10 years, the Sahel region become a geopolitical and a geostrategic nest across the world. Why? Because of the rise of violent extremism, because of armed and rebel groups in northern Mali, like the National Movement for Liberation of Azawad, and then the intervention of French forces, which started early in 2013 by Operation Serval and then Operation Barkhane. So the history and geography of the Sahel, as especially the diversity of the subsoil, the natural resources, that's all about the geopolitical and the geostrategic implication of all the crises we endure in the Sahel region of West Africa. So according to a study of John Meff and Jean-Pierre Gougen, the Sahel region can go actually up to 10 countries like Burkina Faso, Chad, Eritrea, Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, Mali, Mauritania, Niger, and Senegal. So they can cover like more than 7 million square kilometers and are home to nearly 135 million people. Some of the largest countries include a significant amount of the desert, Mali and Niger. Why Mali and Niger is so important for violent extremist groups and armed groups? Because of the vast desert. So Mali is on the edge of the Sahara Desert. Like Mali and Niger, those regions are landlocked, arid, poor, and they have an extremely huge demographic power. Like as you see in Niger, a woman can have from 7 to 8 children. So, however, as you know, the Sahel region have enormous, challenges and difficulties. Actually, there is a resurgence of extremism, terrorism, and organized crime. There is an endemic poverty with high income of inequality, high youth employment, and governance failure. So the second one will be the history of coup. As we talk about the geopolitics of coups in the Sahel, it's really important to talk about the genesis of the coup, the military coup in the Sahel region of Mali. So in Mali, as you know, just after the independence, 8 years after the independence of Mali, it's really important to know that Mali got its independence from 22 September 1960. And from 1968, the president, Modibo Keïta, was overthrown by a military coup on November 9, 1968, by the Lieutenant Moussa Traoré. After that, the second coup was 1991. President Moussa Traoré also came to power in a coup in 1968, and then he also lost his power by 1993 by Lieutenant Colonel Amadou Toumani Touré. And then lately in 2012, when rebel groups and Islamist militants occupied the northern region of Mali, they occupied Gao, Timbuktu, and Kidal, and restored even a Sharia law in the northern region of Mali. And then another military coup came across in 2012, where Amadou Toumani Touré was overthrown by Amadou Aya Touré. So lately, on August 18, 2020, Ibeka also was overthrown by Colonel Assimi Goïta. What is really important here is that it was not only one coup d'etat, but it was actually a second coup. The first of all, it was against the democratic president. And the second one is like they put in place a transition power, and then they make another coup to the transition power, and the junta, the president Assimi Goïta, come back to be the president of the country. So in Burkina Faso, as you can see, like Mali, so all those countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, what they have in common, they are West African countries, and they were all, colonized by the French. And just after the years of independence, all those French colonies experienced hardships in terms of coup d'etat. As you see in Burkina Faso, it started January 3, 1960, and then 1980, and then 22, and then 1983, and then 1977. So I will go directly to the third country, which is Niger. So in 1970, Seyni Kounché took power through a military coup. As you see, just after the independence, all those three regions, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, experienced coup d'etat. The second one was 1996. And then the third one was 1990, and the last one was 2010. And even recently, before the actual president, Mr. Ahmed Bazoum, was before the election, before the intronization of the president, there was a preparation of a coup that was not successful. So now the second point will be geopolitics of the coups in the Sahel region of West Africa. As you know, as I explained in the history of coups in the Sahel regions, those regions are landlocked, arid, poor, but they have tremendous natural resources, just like gold, water, gas, and other natural sources. And then those regions become like a meeting point of international geostrategy and geopolitics, because most of the countries which are actually supporting the Sahel region, closer or not, they have an interest in the Sahel region. For example, the coups in West Africa in the three countries not occur in the same, geopolitical context. And what are the root causes of those military coups in the Sahel? As you know, that since the advent of democracy, the elites of those countries like Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso were in power. And then democracy was not like reality. They never satisfied the needs of the grassroots communities. So there are deficits of good governance, there are deficits of access to justice, and then there are deficits even to provide basic, social services to the communities. So from violent extremism groups to rebel groups to even military, all those actors use the grievances against the democratic elected powers and then take the power. For example, when we talk about, the military coup lately with the president Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta in Mali, as you know, since 2012, Mali was in a conflict, in a civil war in northern Mali, and then the birth of a violent extremism group in northern Mali and even southern region. And then there was a lot of militias developed in the center of Mali, whereby hundreds of civilians lost their life in Ogosagu, in the center of Mali, due to conflicts on militia groups and then violent extremism groups. So the religious leaders in Mali started revolution with the movement they called M5 RFP. The religious leaders, used the grievances against the president Ibeka, and lately, with a lot of demonstration in the streets of Bamako, the junta come to power. And what we are witnessing here in Mali is that this is like the shape of democracy in the Sahel. Why the shape of the democracy? The central question is about why, the communities in the Sahel regions, the citizens turn away from democracy and then embrace military transition. It is really important to know that military transition, a coup d'etat, is unconstitutional. There is no country in the Sahel region that have in their constitution that allow a military coup. It's first of all unconstitutional order. So that means that when there is a military coup, it's like isolation of the country, because international community, international partner, nobody can work with an unconstitutional government, and this will isolate the country, and that's why you witness, all those sanctions in Mali. So in Mali and Burkina Faso, as I already explained, the same prism, the junta take in Mali is the same, the junta of Burkina Faso, the same, the junta in Chad, in Guinea, are using against the democratic power. First of all, it's really important to let you know that this is the failure of the elites of the Sahel region, and then the political elites of the Sahel region. Those junta used the grievances against them and then took the power. And what we are witnessing is, like, as you know, there is a regional organization like ECOWAS, ICWA, and other regional organizations. They putting sanctions like in Mali, in other regions, but the main difficulties is that those sanctions never fragilize, the rulers, but it's fragilized even the regional organization like ECOWAS, because when you see the impact of the sanction on Mali, it's, the poor population of Mali that suffer more than the rulers, than the junta. So that's also push, a number of population to embrace, military coup, and then to embrace junta transition. And why, to answer to the question why citizens in the Sahel turn away from democracy to military transition, is that if a democracy is failing, if there is no access to social services, if the rulers don't satisfy the needs of citizens, if a new actor come with a new narratives, the narratives of the citizen, the narrative of the streets, the narrative of be with the grassroots communities and provide and fill the gap of the democratic elites, that's pushed the citizen to embrace the military transition. And what we are living actually in the Sahel region is that the geopolitics, the geostrategy, and then the social implication of the military power is really important. In terms of geopolitics of those coups, it's really important to know that also there are a lot of, like, Mali is a French colonized country. And even when we talk about the sanction on Mali, most of analysts, most of people say that ECOWAS was influenced by the French power. And that's make also the geopolitical, situation of the sanctions so difficult. And that's pushed the Malian to not just see the military in power like a military transition, but they see them as people who come to free them from the ex-colonizer. And that's one of the main geopolitical implications of the military coup in Mali. So in order to summary, as you know, there was no justification for the coup. President Kabore had inherited a territorial state and an army that lacked the operational capacity to contain the jihadist threat. However, despite the economic and financial crisis, he worked hard to rebuild his army in terms of discipline, material, and military equipment. Even those who staged the coup in Burkina Faso award that our army in the Sahel were not better prepared to fight terrorism. This can be explained by several factors: inadequate military materials and equipment, insufficient military personnel to secure the territory, people, and their property. Just to summarize, is that when you see Mali, Burkina Faso, like when we talk about the three border area, the Liptako-Gourma area, which cover Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, this area became a nest of violent extremism group. And to be clear with you, the militaries, the forces of the Sahel are not prepared to violent extremism organization. They don't have the same equipment. They don't have the same training. They don't have the same goals to fight. And corruption inside, inside those regions, inside those governments, in terms of security defense, in terms of, providing equipment, providing better equipment for military is also a challenge in those countries. And that's why you see the frustration of the population that claim from the government, like the democratic government, security, development, and then the protection of civilians. When those gaps was seen in the street, when demonstrations started in the streets in those regions, the military generally, use all those grievances and then overthrow the power. And when they overthrow the power, the geopolitical aspect of those military coups in the Sahel is determined by how those military are perceived by the ex-colonizer, the French government. And the narrative online on the French news media also push the population to embrace more their transition military, leaders. Why, as you see how the French foreign, ministers, the French diplomat talks about, the Sahel region like Mali, and the way the speech is like a paternalist speech. And there is a new generation who want to face the challenges and refuse to be dominated by an ex-colonizer. So I will stop by here and I will continue in deep with questions. Over.
Thank you. That was indeed a comprehensive and thought-provoking presentation, Mr. Djitteye. I'm sure we will have a lot of questions later. And moving on to the next speaker of the day, Dr. Sankalp Gurjar is a research fellow with the Indian Council of World Affairs, New Delhi. India's foreign policy, Indian Ocean, and Africa are his areas of interest. He carried out his doctoral research at the Department of International Relations, South Asian University, a university established by SAARC nations in New Delhi. He is a regular commentator on contemporary developments related to India's foreign policy, Indian Ocean, and Africa. Including his writing has appeared in newspapers as well as in academic journals, including in Indian Quarterly, Strategic Analysis, Seminar, Deccan Herald, International Affairs, African Affairs, Journal of Indo-Pacific Affairs, and The Diplomat. Dr. Sankalp, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Asia Pathfinders, as well as to the university, Manipal University, for the invitation. After this presentation by Dr. Djitteye, I think there's not much for me to say because he covered so much ground. What I would try to do is, he gave a perspective from the inside. I might try to give a perspective from the outside because we are not from the region, but what we see and what it looks to me as an observer based in India, that would be my sort of starting point. So the first and foremost is the return of coups in Africa. When we talk about coups in Africa, it seems like a regular occurrence. It was to an extent in till about 2000. From about 1960 to 2000, there were like 4 coups a year. That was the frequency. It had fallen in the last 2 decades, but as we had seen in the last 2 years, coups are on the rise. We saw 6 coups in 5 years, and some more coups are expected as well. Looking at a broader, say, West African region, that region was also known for coups. So, for example, countries like Mali and Sudan, they had 8 coups, which are some of them were successful, some of them were not successful. Countries like Niger and Chad, they had like 7 coups. We had Nigeria, they had 8 coups. Nigeria is now a symbol of democracy as such, but it also had a history of coups as such. So it's not exactly sort of a foreign occurrence or a unusual occurrence for Africa, especially for West Africa. But because in the last 2 decades, we haven't seen as many coups as we had seen previously, it feels like something is changing now. Let me give you data. The last 5 years, there were 13 coups across the world, of which only 1 was outside Africa. That was in Myanmar, next door to us. Coups have returned in a way. What are some of the causes of those coups? Dr. Djitteye referred to some of those causes: weak governance, problems, corruption, military taking interest in politics, stuff like that. I think Arab Spring could also be one of the reasons when we are talking about Sahel and West Africa. The destruction of Libya and the sort of instability it has unleashed is a major contributing factor, because Libya has emerged as a corridor for the transit of weapons, fighters, ideologies, money, drugs, everything that we're seeing, because Libya borders Niger and Chad. Libya has been a major factor influencing the developments in West Africa as well. So Arab Spring was one. Second would be obviously the rise of terrorism in the Sahel. As recently as when Taliban took over in Afghanistan, interesting reactions came up from West Africa, because countries were worried that seeing the Taliban victory in Afghanistan, terror groups might feel inspired or reinvigorated in the Sahel region. So that was a factor there. Another factor is the intensified great power rivalry, because West Africa has long been France was a how should I put it? France was jealously guarding. They were not allowing other powers to sort of enter West Africa. They had those deep networks going back to the days of colonialism. They had their own advisors, military trainers placed in African countries. Now things are changing. So China and Russia have entered West African scene, and they are playing their part. So Russia's Wagner mercenaries have been in the news for the last 2-3 years. We are seeing Malian government. They invited Wagner. Now that is something to be taken into account, because Mali was sort of a base for French operations in Sahel. France and Mali have not been seeing eye to eye with each other for the last year or so. French ambassador has been expelled from Mali. Recently, Danish forces have been asked to leave. French forces are they have left Mali. They are now relocating to Niger. And in the vacuum, Russia has stepped in. And it's not just that Russia has stepped in to assist Malian government. Russia is taking, its pound of flesh, because as per reports, maybe Dr. Djitteye might know better, but $10 million per month is what the payment will be for the Wagner Group mercenaries. And sadly, Wagner Group does not have a history that can inspire confidence, because if we saw their failure in Mozambique, they were invited by the government of Mozambique in 2017-18 to fight the terrorists in the northern region of Cabo Delgado. After their failure, Rwandan forces were sort of brought back, and they managed to quell that sort of insurgency there. So presence of Russia is there in Libya as well. Turkey has been fishing in troubled waters. So the interest of great powers has been driving, some of these intensified rivalries. Recently, China had a summit with Africa in Senegal. Their Senegalese president said, that we welcome China's assistance in the fight against terrorism. So we have to see how sort of this great power politics plays out. And France is not giving up easily. That is for sure. French forces are there in Niger. Niger is probably the only country where government supports the French intervention. There is Chad, obviously, but Niger is more so. Apart from that, so let me just tell you an interesting story. So 7th of February meeting between Macron and Putin, where we saw them sitting across each other along that long table, right? So everybody saw that photo, and it was sort of, thought that the Ukraine was a major point of discussion. But what people missed was West Africa was another point of discussion. Actually, they referred to that in their press conference after the meeting, and French and Russian rivalries will be playing out in Sahel in future for sure. Another factor is the decline of democracy. Obviously, that has been a factor. Along with that, weak state capacity has to be added to it, because say compared to Middle East or compared to parts of Southern Africa where state is strong, that's not the case when it comes to West Africa. That's what it looks to me as an observer from outside. Weak state capacities help terrorists, insurgents to sort of fuel feelings against the existing order. French intervention was failed in the sense that security deteriorated to an extent, but government also failed in delivering basic public goods to the people. So that becomes a factor which needs to be taken into account. And finally, I think the war in Ukraine will sort of generate its ripples in Africa. Let me give you just two examples. West Africa primarily. First is obviously, as Russia gets more and more isolated, it will turn to countries of Africa, countries of Asia to do business, to find opportunities, political influence, for exporting its ideology, exporting weapons, everything. So that will generate new pressures. That is first. Second is energy, because Nigeria is an energy-rich country, and as Europe seeks to diversify its energy dependence away from Russia, they are talking of a pipeline coming in from Nigeria through Niger and Algeria to the Mediterranean, and from there the energy will be shipped to Europe. Now passing through, the pipeline is passing through Niger, which means that there will be that politics and geopolitics coming in the picture. And when we have a threat of terrorism, Russia, all of these things combining together, we will get to see, I think, more instability, more uncertainty, and more conflicts as such. So I think that's about it from my side.
Thank you, Dr. Sankalp. You definitely raised points that are to be pondered upon. We shall now open the floor for the question and answers. But before taking the audience questions, I would like to use my privilege as a moderator to ask the first question. How does these recurring coups affect the fight against jihadi groups in the region? As we see, there have been growing desperation to end these Islamist militant groups and their activities in the region. So how does these coups and the instability that they cause affect the fight against these jihadi groups in the Sahel? Either of you can answer.
Yeah, in what concerning Mali, I will just come back again to Gurjar's point about what's happened in Libya, what was the root causes of the crisis in the Sahel region of West Africa. When the international, like when Gaddafi was dead, it was like a contagion in terms of transit of weapons, in terms of transit of money from Libya, in terms of equipment from ex-fighters like Tuareg fighters from Mali who used to work with Gaddafi army. They come back in Mali with money, with equipment, and then they come back with an idea of having their own state by the help geopolitical aspects of that. Some European countries were okay about the separation of Mali. So in terms of your question, to come back, if those coups, the instability affect the fight against jihadist movement, it's really important to know that those last years, since 2012 up to now, in Mali, there are a lot of international forces through United Nations mission MINUSMA, and then Operation Serval and Operation Takuba, which combine French troops and then European troops to fight against terrorists. So once there is a military coup, it's an unconstitutional order. And most of the time, in terms of military cooperation and geopolitics of the coups, and most of the time, the international forces partners stop their activities in terms of fighting. This will give to terrorist group, instead of fighting them, they give them space to develop, to create, and then to develop new strategies. But in the case of Mali, those last weeks, the geopolitics of the crisis changed and the geostrategy changed. And many people say that, since, the Malians start collaborating with the Russians, actually they start really fighting, having results on the field in terms of fighting terrorists. And those last weeks, there is a lot of, information about how the Malian military are defeating, the jihadist group. But in general, when you take Burkina Faso, since the coup, there is no activities, direct activities, or joint patrol in order to fight terrorists. And this will give to terrorist group, spaces to develop the network, to recruit and to plan strategies. Over.
Thank you. So let's go on to the first question from Tanish Saxena. His question for the panel is, China is providing loans in Africa regardless of regime it is dealing with. Does it facilitate the regime change that is prevalent in the Sahel region? How is the Chinese presence in the region?
Should I take it?
Yeah, it's a general question.
Yeah, you can go first and then I will come back.
Okay. No, so China, I haven't seen getting involved in regime change in any way as yet, but Chinese presence does sort of, make a difference. China, I think, didn't condemn the coup in Guinea-Bissau because China has investments in that country, whereas so that is a factor here. How Chinese posturing will change when it comes to their investments in specific countries as such. But as of now, when it comes to engineering or even in terms of fight or training, China is not seen, at least not in the public domain. Maybe GTA might know better, but not to us as such.
Yeah, in terms of geopolitical aspects about Chinese implication in the Sahel region, I don't think it's more on political side or region change. I feel like more about the geo economy implication, because the China really benefit from those West African countries, which is really poor, and they're providing loans, and instead of the loans, they open like the global China market to the citizen of those countries, whereby it's easy to get visa, and then most of the merchants travel to China to bring goods like electronics, laptops, and most of material those countries use, because it's like a cheap market. And in terms of economy, geo-economical dimension, they kind of monopolize, the Sahel region of West Africa. But in terms of, natural resources, they are not monopolizing in terms of mining, gold industry, gas, oil. Those are, the French. But what is really important here is like the geopolitics. As you see, China is close, economically, China is a power in Africa. And then Russia also military. There is a military power like what you see in Central Africa and now in Mali. And then other countries, there is like a challenge among, the friends who keep jealously, like my friends say, Mali is like an old couple who would like to divorce, but they never divorce because it's an ex-colony, you understand. And then the rise of those new power, economic power like China, and geostrategic power like Russia in the Sahel region, is a threat for international geopolitics, because as you know, the Russians have a lot of challenges with other countries, and those countries want to keep their interest. So I will just finish to say the rhetoric in international relations about friendship. Those countries, we must be sure in Africa, they are not here for friendship. Every country is in Africa for their own interest. And that's the international relation among countries. Over.
Thank you, speakers. Tanish has one more question. He asks, is tribalism, food security among the main reason for the coups in the region? Are geographical state boundaries and idea of Westphalian state irrelevant in the Sahel?
It can be among the factors. Maybe later Dr. Gurjar will go. As you know, those communities in the Sahel region of West Africa, like Mali, Niger, Chad, Burkina Faso, Mauritania, and others, like the power is controlled in the capital cities, infrastructure, educational infrastructure, development infrastructure, and then, access to basic social services. But when you go to rural areas, remote areas, this is not reality. And then there is a gap between the citizen and the government. And then there is a deficit even to access to justice, access to natural resources, access to sharing of opportunities. And then, food security, nutrition, and then you can visit some villages that are even no school. I am native from the city of Timbuktu. I don't know if you guys know, in the desert city. And when I grew up, as you know, I was obliged to travel to the capital to study English because there was no university in my region. There was just high school. And you imagine at 16 years old, you leave your family because you don't have university in your school. And all those deficits, access to justice, access to basic social services, the social, the social contract is not also a reality. There is really gap between the communities and then the government authorities. And all those can be grievances that, military use when we come to military coups. Violent extremism group also use as grievance when they recruit young people, because they will say you are left behind, You have no sense of belonging, and there is no school, there is no job for you. And then they provide a new narrative. They fill that gap to the hand of those youth people, and then they recruit from them. Over.
Dr. Sankalp, do you want to take this question?
Yeah, so yes, it is one of the contributing factor, food security, and I saw climate change also. So that is also linked to an extent because the effects of climate change are worst when it comes to the Sahel, probably one of the worst affected regions in the world as well. Secondly, in terms of, there are these studies that have come across where the conflicts between herders and settlers are also there in parts of Sahel. So to an extent, they might also contribute to the larger theme of instability. In terms of terror threat per se, I haven't come across as such when it comes to this conflict between herders and settlers, but it exists. Interesting, terrorism in Sahel is also sort of a homegrown terrorism. You don't have it say exported from Taliban or somewhere else. So they just took up the flag of ISIS as such, but ISIS doesn't necessarily support say West African terrorists, right? So local grievances feed into it. Instability, larger regional and geopolitical context in the picture, and that is how we have a broader picture of instability. It's not just a single factor as such.
Thank you, Dr. Sankalp. Now we move on to a question from Pallavi. Do we see a connection between the Cold War till early 90s to the high frequency of coups in the region? So does the re-emergence of coups have links to the current fractured global geopolitics and rise in multilateral power centers? Over to you, speakers.
Yes. There was a great deal of connection. Many countries, military dictators came up and they raised the flag of, we are leftist or we are anti-communist or whatever. So it was easy. Also, foreign powers, including France, Britain, US, UK, Russia, everybody was supporting these rulers, in the name of strategic interest. So best example is the regime of Mobutu in Congo, basically, which was known as Zaire in those days. Now it's Democratic Republic of Congo. One of the worst human rights records when it comes to domestic affairs, but he was propped up by the US. So the Soviet Union did the similar thing in Ethiopia. In West Africa, France was always there. I have come across this data where France intervened in West Africa for about 23 or 28 times in the last 60 years. And major part of that was also during the Cold War. So yes, Cold War did play a part. And even now, as we are seeing, great power rivalries sharpening up around the world, Africa becomes a major theater, not just for resources, but also for extending influence. So in 2019, Russia had never had Africa Summit as such before that, but they organized one at Sochi in October 2019. Another one is planned this year. So let's wait and watch how many African countries turn up for that summit, because Russia will want to show that it has a support of so many number of countries from Africa. So that is a key factor here. And we will see more pressures on the regimes from, say, US, from France, from Russia, from China as well, to sort of, accede to their demands and expel Russian mercenaries or Chinese for that matter. So that will be a contributing factor for sure.
Mr. Djitteye, do you want to go about it?
Yeah, just to say, sure, because the Cold War, Africa played a great role in the Cold War since, and then now, as you see everything which is going on, for example, in the Sahel region of West Africa is like geostrategic and geopoliticals of great powers. And sometime in my analysis, I kind of say that the Sahel region of West Africa become like a place of game for international geopolitics and geostrategy. You can see something happen in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. Maybe there are two, like the bipolarization of the world, the capitalists and the communists are still fighting to each other, but those are not direct fight, but it is geostrategic fight and geostrategic and geopolitical interests. And then they kind of came in Africa in different forms. It can be development, it can be global cooperation, it can be humanitarian, but they are everywhere. And as I say, I will tell it again, in international relations, there is interest, there is no friendship. Over.
Thank you. The next question is from Dr. Anand. His question is, which according to you is the most stable country in the region and why? In other words, is there a regional model for stability? The question is for both the speakers.
Senegal is one in my view from the outside. Nigeria is another, Nigeria and Ghana, although they have had their bouts of instability within, despite democracy coming in. But at a broader level, political sort of transitions or regular occurrence of elections, responsive governments, I think these three countries, for me, sort of, can be a model in their own ways for others. Liberia has also emerged, but not to that extent.
Yeah, for me, I feel like I agree with you, Senegal. Why Senegal is stable? As you know, there is like the conflict since the independence in the Casamance area in Senegal, but this conflict never scaled. As a researcher, we must ask ourselves why this is not scaled, and it's really important to let you know that Senegal is kind of a hub of most of international organization offices, regional offices of UNESCO, OCHA, all those international organizations. But the geographic, the geopolitical and geostrategic implication, they most of the time, people who are behind conflict, coups, people who are behind everything's going on in the Sahel are interested to see a place like Senegal, who hosts all those organizations, burn. I can say no because of the geopolitical implication and because of, it's like when you go to Geneva in Europe, nobody will touch Geneva because all those institutions are there, all the banking are there, all the system are there, but nobody can touch. So you can see why it's stable. But when we come to Nigeria, the problem of Nigeria was Boko Haram. So in northern Nigeria, it's not like Maiduguri, I have been for research, it's really hard. But when you go to Abuja, Lagos, it's a new reality because with the rise of the youth, the rise of internet and the economic dynamics of Nigeria, I can say it's stable, but it is not 100% stable because there is, fundamentalism ideologies in northern Nigeria that can even reach the capital. Over.
I would like to direct the next question to Mr. Djitteye. This is a common question from Mr. Shravan Udayagiri and Kiran Bhatt, who is also a master's student from the department. Both of them have asked almost the questions on, has the geopolitics of Sahel region affected by the effects of climate change? I know Dr. Sankalp did mention it, but if you can throw more light on it.
Yeah, those last year when we take the the center of Mali, the climate change on links to conflict and stability in Mali is like scarcity. Like, as you know, during with the climate change, there is, grazing land is so scarce in some region of Mali, like central Mali in the Masina area. And then, the community, the Fulani community, who are the farmers, who are the herders with their cattle, and then the farmers, which are Bambara or Donso communities, who farm the land, who grow crops, they are in trouble because of those grazing lands. The herders, sometimes their animals enter to the farms. And most of the conflict we identify are, causes because of the scarcity of the grazing lands, and then herders and farmers. And what is really important, if you analyze those conflicts, it started from a herders and then a farmers, and then it's become like inter and intra-community conflict. And then those conflicts push even some youth from like the herders ethnic groups or the farmer ethnic group to also join violent extremism group in order to be in power, in order to defend their tribes, in order to defend their herds, or to defend their lands. So you see how complex, from climate change to inter-community conflict to even radicalization. Over.
Thank you. I would like to ask the next question to Dr. Gurjar. This question is from Ms. Sindhu Dinesh. Her question is, how effective is the role played by regional organizations like the ECOWAS in dealing with these coups?
ECOWAS has taken a tough stand, and they have expelled, they have put sanctions on Mali, I think even on Guinea. They have been working in coordination with African Union because they are worried. See, the region of West Africa has a history of coups. So it's not just that the region wants to sort of, go for the values of democracy as such, but many of these countries are worried that the coup contagion might spread to their own countries. So, that is also a factor here. But ECOWAS has been taking a tough stand. Now it will be interesting to see, while imposing sanctions also, there is an element of selectivism, because great powers are involved in this, and who is doing what matters there as well. So some countries will suffer more and some countries will not suffer. So that remains a thing. And that is why ECOWAS, even if it wants to do things, might not be as effective as say a regional organization would like it to be, but they have been taking a tough stand against coups for sure. Nigeria is a driving force basically, so that is a factor here.
Thank you, Dr. Sankalp. Next question I would like to ask Mr. Djitteye. It's from Shravan Hegde. Are ethnic rivalries a major factor? Could redrawing unnatural colonial borders help stabilize the region?
Yeah, most of the time, as you know, in the Sahel regions, there is, multiplicity of ethnic groups, and this is also a problem of conflict. Over.
I want to add a point here. Shravan, right? The question was asked by Shravan.
Shravan.
Yeah, Shravan, go and see and read the speech delivered by Kenyan ambassador to the UN while the discussion on Russia was on in UNSC, where he spoke about how Africa sort of learned to deal with unnatural borders and how they have to make do with it. Also, the Organization of African Unity, when it was formed in 1963, in a way, since then, borders have been sort of, they've been formed. So there is a great deal of opposition. You cannot redraw borders or anything. Africa is unnatural in that sense, but they have learned to deal with it.
And then when we trace back to colonial era, so most of the problem we face in West Africa is sometimes linked to those borders limitation. And it was really a geostrategic, factor that really maintained most of the West African countries into, a transition time. They can be stable 20 years, 50 years, but after that, when population grow, when resources become strong, it can be factors of conflicts.
Thank you. With that, I think we've almost come to the end of the session. I would like to thank both the speakers on behalf of the Department of Geopolitics and International Relations for their time and their valuable opinion and insights. We've had such thought-provoking ideas and insights today, which we'll hopefully later deliberate and ponder over that. Now I hand over the session to Pallavi for her concluding remarks.
Thank you, Poornima, for that amazing moderation. So, and definitely to our speakers, Mr. Djitteye and Dr. Gurjar. I think I personally am sure the participants also feel similar, is we've learned a lot about the region, the developments in the region, and that's our aim as Asian Pathfinders, to bring these discussions to the fore so that we have that way of learning about different regions. Sometimes it's not always possible to do that, it's travel to those. So thank you to the speakers and the moderator for this amazing discussion, and definitely to Dr. Ravindranathan, Dr. Anand, and the entire Department of Geopolitics and IR at MAHE for reaching out to us and, collaborating with us actually for this discussion, because, it's really good to partner with amazing institutions like MAHE and, bring these discussions to you. So thank you so much. And definitely we'll have more sessions like this in the coming weeks. So definitely keep in touch with us on our social media, and have a good weekend, everyone. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sankalp. Thank you, Hadj, for joining so early. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah, bye.